Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this morning. We are today going to be having a relatively informal chat without too many question changes. We're going to try and keep this quite informal. When we spoke about this earlier, we found that there was a lot to talk about without much prompting, pun intended, for what's to come. So we're going to be talking about emerging cyber technologies and OT, what's real, what's next, that kind of thing. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of misinterpretation, and a lot of trepidation, let's say, about what might be coming. So over the next 45 or so minutes, we're going to be talking about that. My name is Rick. I'm a security researcher at Orange Cyber Defense, and today I'm joined by Tom Squared, Tom from Fortinet and Tom from Nozomi. So if you guys could also introduce yourselves a little bit, please, too.
Great. So good to meet you all. My name's Tom Doyle. I'm our OT Business Development Manager looking after the UK and I region. I've been here for about 1.5 years now, but prior to this, I was working in the CNI space for about 8 years, most recently as the OT Security Lead for National Grid ED.
Good stuff. Thanks, Tom. My name is Tom Westenberg, Technical Sales Engineer for Nozomi Networks. I look after the UK and I region, very similar like Tom. Worked in OT for about 8-9 years now, worked in many different CNI verticals over the years, consultancies, managed service houses, and asset owners as well. So yeah, good to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you, both of you, for joining me as well. So I should have had this slide up already. This is us, handsome bunch of chaps, as I'm sure you'll agree. And let's get cracking. Emerging technologies, we can't avoid artificial intelligence. It's pretty much the only 2 letters on the agenda right now. So AI in IT and OT cybersecurity, because it's nice to make the comparison of not just what AI is like in OT, but how we actually treat it differently to IT. So what are the uses and limitations? How about I kick it off to Tom Doyle?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a relatively open-ended question, right? And maybe something to start off with would be around what AI are we talking about, right? We've got machine learning. Are we talking more about large language models? I think on the machine learning side, Fortinet, we've been using it for 20 years now. Threat intelligence, identifying IOCs, malicious files, etc., etc., and that's a pretty proven technology. But on the LLM side, I feel like we can get quite creative with use cases. Maybe something like note-taking is a pretty mundane one, but you could see a massive uptake in SOC efficiency for, taking notes throughout incidents, throughout triage, rather than having to type them up yourselves. I don't know if anyone's got any opposing thoughts to that. I know it's a pretty boring view. Surely there's going to be much more around kind of vulnerability management. I know there's exposure management or attack surface management where you could be leveraging AI to prioritize the risk of certain devices. You could be talking around closing the skills gap with more context for your IT analysts. So maybe you've got an alert, let's say Modbus, let's say you've got a write request to a certain register on a device which you've never seen before. How would you explain that to an IT analyst? How would you explain the impact of that? Now, you'd need to have an AI with all the right context to be able to explain that in natural language to someone that has never worked in that environment before.
And I think to add to that, Tom, it's really, and I would say the most use case we see, sort of going onto your thread, is really business efficiencies, right? So what has been historically either a analytical skill of an analyst, what has taken a lot of time to compile or do a comparison or write a report. I would say one good angle of, specifically when we talk about LLMs, we've been doing machine learning for many, many years already, and different forms of AI, of course. But it's really on the efficiencies. Effectively, when customers specifically talk to Nozomi, they're more of, do I use the LLM capability, or am I investing in more analysts, for example, to give a very practical example. I don't know, Rick, how do you see it with from your OCD background?
I like that we've had this variety of discussion points already. We've kind of like seeded the discussion, so I think we'll be addressing a few of these points later on. I think it's really important to distinguish that this latest kind of development of large language models is just that, a latest development in artificial intelligence, and that we have been using machine learning and other derivatives of artificial intelligence for quite some time. And it does genuinely seem to be that this is the time that's really kicked off. Like we've seen tools with AI all over it for like decades now, as marketing purposes, but all of a sudden it's really taken its resurgence. And I think the way large language models are going, especially with the way that they can interact with the environment that they work in, perhaps dangerously, is something that is quite new. It's the where we've previously trained models, machine learning models, to really focus on analyzing very specific things and categorizing specific things. Now we're looking at this more of a much more broad and open-ended kind of artificial intelligence that we're looking at, where it handles kind of like these open-ended user requests on almost anything, which I think is possibly why it's so alluring, because there are so many potential opportunities. I don't think we've necessarily found all or even the best use cases for them yet. And certainly for this question itself, there are plenty of uses and there are also plenty of limitations. And I think both of those are very, very tightly woven, especially in operational technology. But I think we can get to that before I continue on with my soliloquy. But yeah, so what do we think? What do we think at the moment, other than kind of like writing reports and stuff? What do we think the actual like the uses are right now? Maybe more in a more technical sense. Are there any more technical reasons things we can be doing? So I noticed we also mentioned using it to explain potential SOC artifacts. That's a really fascinating use case, especially something for more niche technology areas like OT. In IT, like you've got this generalized SOC skill, right? But if you want to kind of democratize who can work in an OT SOC or a SOC that attends to OT environments, AI seems like a really good use case, right?
100%. And I think it's going to be based on the context the AI has. So does the AI know exactly what this OT environment looks like? Modbus, IEC 61850, the messages look the same. You can use them in hundreds of different environments. Is that going to open a switch or a breaker in the power network, or is it going to turn the AC off, right? Now, if the AI has got the context on the architecture, the physical architecture of the infrastructure, then it could advise IT analysts to make these decisions, to make informed decisions in a security incident. Slightly, to take it back a step, it could also explain what these protocols are doing. It's changing the state of the physical world. It would need less context to do that then, right? I think the other use case from a technology point of view, we're starting to see more, and Fortinet are implementing this now, agentic AI throughout our security platform, and some use cases there would be around automated triage. So you've got an alert come in, and you could then gather evidence using AI to say, okay, well, with this TTP, with this indicator, where do we want to look next? Rather than having playbooks pre-assigned for that, you could go out and start to generate all of this intelligence for an analyst before they even pick up the alert. Of course, they can then do their manual triage, their manual investigation to add on top of that. But it's all about, much like what Tom said, speed and efficiency in these environments.
No.
I don't know, Tom, more thoughts?
I would say kind of the term human in the loop is really important. Effectively, we can do a lot of smart things with AI around enrichment and correlation and things that sort of a superhuman analyst will be able to do. But unfortunately, we're kind of, last webinar, we were talking kind of chasing the unicorns, right? OT specialists with cloud, OT specialists in general. They're not very far or they're far between in terms of availability or cost as well. But especially around sort of collating information is where we see the value. And probably the thing that we can talk about next as well is that it's always with a human in the loop, right? We can't allow a large language model to do things automatically. I would say from our perspective, and we'll be keen to hear your thoughts as well, is it's also potentially a legal liability for technology that makes decisions on its own. Like probably Rick, from the research you're doing, large language models, in some cases we cannot explain exactly what they do, how they work, and why they have reasoned a certain way. So I would say definitely on doing things, quote, quote, auto-magically. I think that's where we are definitely going to see some of the limitations in terms of what AI can do, right? It's not the one magic saving bullet.
Absolutely, it's why I did flinch a little bit when Tom said agentic stuff in OT. Are we getting like an open claw for OT then? Are we getting OT claw? That's going to be it's going to be doing everything you need. Or are we going to be a little bit more sensible? Because there's serious differences, I think, and to draw back to that comparison on the slide between what you can allow to happen in IT and what you can allow to happen in OT, and not just the obvious of something physical can go wrong. But just the speed with which it can happen in a real-time system in comparison to into like some potential data loss in IT, for example, or some kind of mishap like that. It seems like the stakes are significantly higher at a quicker rate.
And I think it comes back to effective risk management, right? Everything comes back to risk management. If you've got OT systems now, OT is a very, very wide term. In some cases, this is going to be the highly critical real-time systems that you're speaking about. It can also be something that's relatively negligent. Let's say a gate on the perimeter of a site. You might have 3 or 4 of them. Still OT? Is the impact the same? Not so much. Could we look to leverage AI and agentic AI to make decisions where the risk is lower? Maybe. It's going to come down to every business individually to do that assessment and understand whether or not it is applicable for them. But agree with you completely. I think largely human in the loop is what you need to be doing, especially in these CNI type environments.
Absolutely. I think there's all sorts of different things we could speak about here as well. So like I think if we go to the next question, actually it might spawn some more discussion, because how is AI changing the OT cyber threat landscape? And I've got some spicy opinions here, but I think I'll throw it out to you guys first to get your opinions, just in case I start on the wrong foot.
Yeah, I'll take my perspective and pinch in here. I mean, from an AI perspective, especially when we talk about LLM category, it is easier to effectively develop, let's say, adversarial capability in general on a very high level. Probably about 5 to 10 years ago, there are libraries in Python to interface with Modbus and with Ethernet IP and all these industrial protocols, but maybe not so for the niche variations, like maybe the DCS categories. So I think in that sense, we are probably better, but I do believe to kind of start us off with, it's easier to develop adversarial capability. The other question is, have we seen that in real life? And I would say not really. We haven't really seen any LLM generated tools go around in the wild as well. And I'll leave it there. And I know Rick has some spicy comments as well.
I feel like this one's kind of hard to quantify again, right? I've got a few thoughts. So one of them being attackers, they operate like businesses. Some of these cyber criminal gangs, some of these nation states, I would expect that they are going to be leveraging AI for very similar use cases to the blue team in driving efficiencies. Right, I spoke about note taking. There's no reason they couldn't be doing the same thing. If they save 10 minutes throughout an incident, instead of taking notes for handover, they can get AI to do it. That's 10 minutes additional dwell time they've got. That's an interesting way of looking at it. I think the other side we need to speak about it is the more mundane. We've seen phishing emails. They're getting better and better because they can use AI to generate them. They can be more tailored. They can do research. But I think it is a real threat. Phishing is still the top threat vector, right? And it's always getting better. Now, I like what Tom was mentioning. AI does open up the capability to develop these adversarial capabilities. And I think it kind of lowers the bar of entry for a lot of attackers now. They can get exploit chains explained to them. They can, in some cases, develop their own exploits or their own packages using AI. I think the other one, which is in the media a lot at the moment, is the ability to string attack chains together. To be able to understand someone's environment and plan out an attack path using AI, or in some cases, get the AI to run the attack itself. And these are all kind of new concepts. And how do we protect against that? Time will tell. I think the last point that I have is where you have implemented private AI into a business and you've generated your own context, your own AI, you own it. Well, that is now a pretty critical system because it's going to have access to all sorts of other systems within your environment, and also a lot of information which you probably wouldn't want an attacker to have access to. So it's now its own critical asset that you need to protect the same way you would any other critical asset. There's a lot
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah. Just on that final point, I think it's always really interesting to make that distinction between how the bad guys are using AI, how AI can make us more vulnerable, and also how AI can be attacked itself. So there are all sorts of different things, but if we focus on specifically how it's changing the cyber threat landscape and look adversarially, I think Tom Westenberg was on. I almost got the name right then. Was onto something, because what we see at OCD is this veritable hockey stick of vulnerabilities being released, and it was kind of obvious with like the unfortunately grabbed onto as a buzzword mythos moment, where when we started to see the capabilities of these frontier level models identifying vulnerabilities, we've seen like this influx of CVs. Whether they are valuable or not, that's another thing to talk about later. But we've seen these vast numbers of like this serious increase in volume of CVs since frontier models have really gotten to that level of capability, and some open source models or open weight models as well, of course. And in doing so, that means that in our vulnerability operation centers, we actually notice that there are far more vulnerabilities in client infrastructure as well. And they've historically found it very difficult to keep up with the human-driven vulnerabilities that have released. So now we're seeing like this overwhelming number of vulnerabilities in client estates that we're constantly battling. But what we are not seeing is an increase in the number of incidents. The number of vulnerabilities in these estates has skyrocketed. The AI itself has democratized the technical skills to the bad guys to be able to do these attacks. Perhaps not in OT, and that might be one of the things that we're seeing. But this is in IT and OT. But despite that, the incidents haven't increased yet. Perhaps that's a cultural thing, and perhaps hacking is the kind of substrate that on which actual criminal or like intelligence officer skills need to build, and that's what we're not seeing, and therefore we don't need to be so worried about the democratization of cyber skills or offensive cyber skills through artificial intelligence, at least not for now, at least not until AI also manages to help people monetize their access or do other nefarious things, I guess. So that was kind of my spicy take, that where are the attacks, like, if we're seeing it. I have some ideas as to why they're not there. I kind of alluded to it with the whole, perhaps there's just a level of socio kind of cultural elements to it that people just don't have. But yeah, perhaps the average pen tester and red teamer aren't necessarily one step away from being an elite cyber criminal.
No, and I think we've mostly spoken about the red team side of the house, right? Offensive capabilities, but also maybe to answer the same question from a blue team or defensive side of the house, I would say also tooling in general has become better. You know, we are using large language models, we're using kind of better platforms to manage vulnerabilities, to help us build plans, to help us do all the analysis from vulnerabilities that are identified through sort of the Mythos open weights models as well, to make our life easier. So you have almost two sides of the same coin. Yes, you have large language models. Offensively, we should theoretically see an influx. Practically, maybe not so. But on the other side, we, especially about attack surface management, vulnerability management, sort of the more let's say analytical topics in OT, you also have capabilities there. And maybe another question that I'll throw over the proverbial fences as well is, are we just chasing larger and larger LLMs? You know, like, do we think a larger LLM is always better for defensive or offensive capabilities as well?
I think
that's an interesting one.
So, I mean, OT, we've been dealing with unpatched systems and vulnerabilities for how many years now, right? A lot of what we do is around mitigating controls. So we need to put in kind of a protective shield around these assets that we can't patch. So maybe one of the reasons as to why we haven't seen, you know, true positive action on objective incidents is, although these vulnerabilities are out, all of the blue team tools are also aware of them, and they're able to mitigate the risk associated with it for all of these vulnerable devices. And by no means that's saying don't patch these devices. We still need to have robust patch management kind of policies and processes, but maybe there's an element of tools are blocking these exploits before they can turn into incidents.
That's an interesting point. I mean, we aren't necessarily seeing that ourselves. Sorry to totally throw water on your bonfire to lighten up that phrase. But I don't know. I think one of the things that's really interesting is the speed of implementation, or the speed of utilization and uptake of AI on both sides, because it's especially when you're really talking about like quite agentic stuff, like really like the emerging technologies of AI, let's say, like the brand new stuff. It kind of relies on a level of maturity already to be able to implement. Like, this is you alluded to it before, Tom, where you were saying kind of like it's a risk-based approach, and it's the same when you implement any kind of security tool or new feature, anything. You need to really weigh up the risks. You need to almost quantify what you're doing, and really make sure that it's safe, especially in an OT environment, to be able to be deployed. So this kind of incremental, iterative approach to deploying AI tools means that it's not just oh, we've just started our security journey, we haven't really got patching or network segmentation sorted, but bang, Claude, please secure my AI, secure my OT. That's not really the case. But comparing that with the cyber threat landscape, I don't think we're seeing a level of autonomy there either. In terms of, like, we're not seeing the incidents, and they have access to these vulnerabilities, but we're not seeing AI-driven attacks. Like the evidence is quite low for AI to be fully automating attacks, at least so far. I'm not saying that this is never going to happen or that it's not happening at all, but it's a very low volume for where we are. So it's kind of like this risk appetite arms race of who is interested in actually kind of stepping over every single boundary that comes across, and who's going to automate and who's going to implement AI functionality faster, the defenders or the adversaries. And I think it's a really interesting, almost sociological conundrum right there. And it's almost more interesting in an OT setting than it is in the generic IT setting, I find. Did that not leave anything open? I have other things to say if you want me to continue.
No, carry on. It's an interesting point.
Okay. So another thing that I think that is kind of quite overblown at the moment is the whole like I really dislike saying this, but the Mythos class models, like these real frontier models, GPT 5.6 as well. The fear around them is almost unnecessary. Maybe not with 5.6 that just came out, but with Mythos, when everyone was worried about Project Glasswing and the whole Mythos moment of now they're going to be inundated with vulnerabilities and the bad guys are going to be using this against them. It's like, well, half of the large European companies that could have utilized that didn't get access and didn't get into the project. So if large, very legitimate organizations are struggling to get access to such advanced tooling, do we really need to worry about kind of teenagers in Russia who are comprising of ransomware gangs? Like, is that really something we need to worry about? Or instead, do we need to focus our sights on more things like open weight models that are increasingly catching up? And their capability isn't slowing down in any way. Every time there's an advancement in a frontier level model, there's a similar advancement or even quicker advancement in the open weight model ecosystem. I mean, distillation and all sorts of things are facilitating that, and then those distillations of the open weights get distilled back into closed weight models as well, which is really bizarre. But this whole open weight ecosystem, where all you need is to invest a little bit, and let's face facts, all the cyber criminals aren't short on money right now. All you need to do is invest a little bit of local infrastructure, and then you can host some of these extremely powerful and increasingly more powerful models to actually do what you want, and no one can monitor it. It's not being processed on cloud. There's no frontier lab that's basically getting increasing regulatory pressure to be liable for the things that happen with the model. So maybe the worry about frontier capability isn't where we should be focusing. That was a long talk.
And I think, Rick, to answer your question, I mean, you almost answered it yourself. But should we be scared of these models? I would argue no. I would say what NCSC UK has been saying for the last couple of years is really secure by design and resilience, right? That's kind of where it all ties into. We haven't seen a massive fallout other than the CVE database getting hundreds of thousands of or thousands of records that cannot be categorized and analyzed quickly enough. There's real struggles there from an intake perspective on the vulnerability landscape. But the world didn't end, right? There is a lot of good capability in LLMs, and I would say, just to people, if they're listening to our conversation, as these LLM models, they are not the threat in itself, right? Yes, there are things that they're discovering. I think as Tom mentioned already before, is in OT environments, we're running systems that are 5 to 10 years old. So a lot of these vulnerabilities are already there. If not, you just have one more. But over the entire, kind of like the resilience model, there's been very little impact. Just to put the listeners to some comfort as well, at least from my perspective.
And I'd echo what Tom's saying. It's going to necessitate doing the basics right, doing them well. ensuring you've got segmentation, up-to-date asset inventory, understanding what the risk is. I was going to say vulnerabilities, but let's change that to risk. Understanding what risk AI poses to your business, to your minimum viable business, your critical part of your business, and being able to minimize the impact of any incident on any one of those processes, especially in OT, is going to be key.
No. And I would say any of these AI innovations that we're seeing, I don't know, and maybe question to you as well, I don't believe it's changed the way, the things you do fundamentally. It's changed the way how we do things, but it never changed what we do.
100%. There's I can't remember where I read it, and it was extremely insightful, and it was really like focusing on that exact thing. There is an increased volume of vulnerabilities, but it's more of the same vulnerabilities that we are used to dealing with. So it's not necessarily that you have to really start planning and doing things extremely differently on a defensive perspective, because there are no different classes of attacks. This isn't like a Spectrum meltdown moment where all of a sudden we had to like realize that the processors were vulnerable to a completely different class of vulnerability that we'd never really properly considered before. Like, this is just more of the same. However, taking this to like kind of like an OT perspective is where I actually think this is interesting, because a lot of OT security has relied on obscurity of the technology as well. I'm not saying a lot of it as in like with a good security program, but a lot of like mediocre to immature security programs have essentially relied on lack of knowledge on the adversary's behalf, or lack of return on investment, because learning that a lot of the OT skills and knowledge takes time, and therefore you can't monetize it enough to make it worthwhile, or even if even if you're like not necessarily trying to make money off of it, but if you're a hacktivist, it's not worth the effort for the kind of payoff that you're going to get for the cause. Whereas OT, because of that obscurity, because of that lack of knowledge, and what AI fundamentally does is democratizes knowledge. Because of that, and it makes it so much easier to achieve, are we potentially at risk of seeing OT not necessarily become attacked more in general, but kind of like come up to almost par with IT, and we start to see it kind of get parity, where we can see that it's getting attacked as much as IT?
Yeah, it's in. I don't know if I would agree, to be honest, Rick, because I think, and in some cases, especially when we talk about very specific OEMs or products or technologies that are in the OT environment, I don't believe models have been fully trained on this insider knowledge. Let's take a very practical example. Let's say you have a very obscure OT protocol, something from a very small vendor. In some cases, the documentation is just not there. The model is not trained on it. So I would argue in these use cases, how would the model operate? I would say more from maybe an analytical skill. The model can help you. Okay, how do you reverse engineer maybe a library or a protocol, or it can help you there. But I wouldn't argue that the knowledge is inherently in the model.
That's a good point. But it's when the models understand the vendor ecosystem that you find just like of the victim environment, and then the models can then read piping and instrumentation diagrams. They can read the configuration files of the HMIs and the PLCs and stuff like that. I feel like that's when it can interpret that and do process comprehension and tell the bad guy, oh, well, then if you essentially like mess with this input, then this output is likely to happen. And then judging from this being this kind of physical environment, the physical impact will be that. Then that kind of thing is, I don't think is beyond the realms of science fiction.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree, and I would say, and we have some examples in history to look at as well, and probably, and the most difficult thing coming from an offensive security background in OT is reliability. right? So reliability of getting away with an intrusion once, and probably the most difficult thing is doing it twice. We've seen bits being inverted, and therefore you don't crash the safety system, for example. There have been these trivial things that reliability-wise have been missed. But I would say overall, the exploit chains and the entire process you would go through, it is getting easier. It's like a guide helping you and walking along the way. So I would say there's... Sorry, Tom, go on.
Just to kind of add to that thought, as you were kind of talking about it, I think you're generating lots of great use cases for blue teamers, right? Because what we're talking about is the attackers have got a skills gap or a knowledge gap, and they're leveraging AI to fill that so that they can attack these new environments. To mitigate that risk, you do the same thing with your blue teamers, right? They're in the same position as us, and we can use the same tools to do the same thing.
Yeah. I know Rick is going to ask for a hot take at the end of the webinar, so I guess the hot take will bring it early, and I would say do whatever red teamers are doing, right? Hack your own OT environment, or at least go through the process. Maybe that's a good way to approach it from a process perspective, at least to make your own environment more secure.
I think if anything, expert human-driven pen testing and red teaming has become a lot more valuable, especially with the use of AI now, because you really need to ensure that you've kind of locked everything down. Like it's genuinely like there was a time when it was like, oh, is it all going to be automated? Is it going to be useless in the future? Are we just going to have like kind of AI defending us and basically sit back and relax? And I think it's not the case. We haven't been able to automate out previous advancements from adversaries with new technologies, and I don't think when both sides get access to the same kind of intelligence and artificial intelligence, that means we can automate them out. I think there's going to be more jobs created from this. I'm bullish on the future of jobs with respect to artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. If that's a good deviation to make. Just let me interject for 1 second. We have about 5 minutes left, and there haven't actually been any questions in the chat, and we could go on for the next 2 hours probably. But if you do have any questions, if you want to prompt us by any chance, please drop questions in chat, even thoughts. Steer us in a spicy direction for the past 5 minutes if you want. But yeah, I think I think that as well, we kind of alluded to it before, but getting back to it is the skills gap idea and how this can. I don't think it's going to solve the skills gap. I think that's one thing that's very important. I don't think an unskilled person with their hands on AI is a skilled person. But I think it kind of softens that curve a little bit. We've got a question. Since AI depends on continuous updates like ChatGPT when applying AI in OT, like in Nozomi and Fortinet, is this AI infrastructure on continuous updating over the internet? That is a good point. Every time I open Claude or ChatGPT, and that is daily, there's a new update, which isn't really conducive to an OT environment. But you're going to need an internet connection for things like ChatGPT anyway. So update's really the thing that you need to worry about there.
I think something to talk to as well is AI in OT doesn't have to be on the plant floor. So you could be using AI in kind of level 3.5, level 3, where it's much easier to get access to the internet to drive up business efficiencies is a good example. So something like predictive maintenance, you could be pulling that information out of OT to somewhere where you are able to have those continuous updates from a cybersecurity point of view. You could have secure data going to a centralized SOC where you could be leveraging AI to inform decisions, this sort of thing. I think OT is very rarely now just in the plant floor. It's very wide across the entire business a lot of the time.
No, and I would say as well, I would say how we think about updates is really kind of looking in the same model, right? Or the same training set effectively that the model has been used on. As long as there's no wide deviations between the model, the way how a large language model responds to a user is generally the same, right? There's not it's not changing its recommendations or the way how it interacts. So I would say updates maybe not so much, but mostly look at the model and how often the model changes.
Interesting. They were some good takes, but we have just over 3 minutes left. So Tom Squared, I was wondering if each of you could possibly provide me with one kind of takeaway overall, either from this discussion or maybe something we haven't even mentioned yet, that is kind of like your overarching opinion. It can be bullish or bearish on AI, but what is your overwhelming like main opinion on AI in OT?
Happy to go. I
Let's go for
mean,
it.
AI provides a massive opportunity for businesses operationally and from a cybersecurity point of view. My view is, as with any new technology, you need to take a risk-based approach. You need to ensure your policies, processes, everything is updated and they are AI ready before you can dive headfirst into it. But no, I'm bullish. I think AI is a good thing for OT. I believe it's going to save us a lot of time, a lot of money, and reduce risk greatly if we do it right. But it will come back to that initial risk assessment, is my view.
Yeah, I would echo what you're saying, Tom. I would say, AI is really valuable. I would say use it in good conscience and deploy it where appropriate. I definitely think both organizations and individuals that are not using AI will be taken over either by having a better security posture, better people process technology, the skills. So I don't think ignoring it is the answer. You will have to adapt. I think in OT we're very known to sort of this slow adoption, connecting things more and more to cloud infrastructure that we talked about on the last webinar as well. But I'm very positive about adoption of AI. It's there as a business efficiency, and I think the overall risks weigh out the limitations and the yeah.
Well, there you have it. Thank you both. I think I agree. I'm overwhelmingly bullish. I think we already can see a number of use cases where AI can be quite transformative in OT, with careful and risk-based implementation, of course. And I think we're only scratching the surface on its use cases. And as we continue to evolve, and see where it goes, it's probably going to be more and more necessary to keep your eye on all of the emergent different traits of AI and the new types of functionality that it can provide. It's not just a install and leave forever case. It's constantly going to be, at least with this rate of change, it's constantly going to be something you have to monitor. We are out of time, and I think that's it. I think we could go on for another 2 hours. We have so much to say here. We have so many interesting opinions, and I would love to hear from Tom Squared even more. If you would like to get in contact with us, I don't know if we have details, but we had time for Q&A. We had one question. And thank you very much for joining us this morning. I hope you enjoyed this. Let us know if you like this kind of like chill coffee kind of and a chat style webinar rather than something like kind of lecturing and formal. And reach out if you want to hear more from our own cyber defense, Fortinet or Nozomi. And thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Tom Doyle and Tom Vestenberg.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks all.